I know I missed you too. I missed all of y'all.
You got a gear for us?
Yeah, I got some gear. I was in the woods a lot over the last couple of weeks, a lot more than normal. I felt like I was completely detached from everything because I would go hunting for a few days and I had to come back and do a little work and then I go straight back. So, but it was awesome. It's what I wanted to do. So, and that's what I kind of do that every year, the 1st of November. Not kind of. I've been doing it for like 10 years. I go on a trip with a friend of mine, and we plan that every year, the 1st of November. If you don't know already, I love to hunt. I love to bow hunt more than anything. So that's kind of the time that I spend doing that. And we usually hunt for about 10 days, and it was awesome. But what I do during that time a lot is I just sit there. Anybody been hunting before? A little bit. You kind of just sit there. Chris was in like twice. You went with me one time. But obviously you're sitting there looking for a deer, but you sit there in the woods and just what most people say, just be bored most of the time. But I'm not really bored out there. I enjoy it, and I think a lot, and I reflect a lot about what God's doing and what's going on in life and in general, and and inevitably the older I get, the more stuff I have on. I used to just sit there and just want to shoot something, I'd just be like, where's the deer? But the older I get in life, the more stuff is going on, the more water that's been under the bridge, the more I sit there and just, my mind never rests. I just I'm always thinking. I'm constantly praying. I don't know if y'all, when you get a lot of time on your own, it's like the idle mind is the devil's playground. You ever heard that saying? It's like I sit there and I start get long enough, and and so it makes me pray because I start thinking negative thoughts. I start thinking about everything that my enemy's trying to do to not let me enjoy any time that it should be with God, right? And so I spend a lot of time in prayer in that, and there's a few things that are just time tested and true about my time that I spent out there this time, and that's that God is good. He really is. He's a good father, and he's never lied. He's never not taken care of what he said he was going to take care of. He's never not held true to his promises. He's never not done anything in my life. And this is the next thing. God's right. We got to get that at some point in life where we say, hey, you know what? God's just right. And when we feel him leading us and we hear his voice, and when we're trying to learn his voice and trying to learn to hear him and get to know him more, and we start feeling those things, the convictions and stuff in our life, he's right every time. He's never not right. And then you place that with God being good, what he's wanting is the very best for his children, and what his very best is for us is the very best for us. That's what we were created to do. He designed us. He knit us together in our mother's womb. He knows every bit of your wiring, and he knows everything that would ever give you any kind of joy, satisfaction, fulfillment, and everything in life. He knows more than you could ever imagine knowing about yourself. So he's right about what he's asking you to do. He's good in what he's wanting you to do. And this is the next thing. We can trust him. Now, we've been over all of these things. You can trust him when he leads you to something. You can trust him when he's telling you to walk away, to walk to do something. You can trust him, right? He can hold tight in that because he's good. And he's got great ideas, right? He's got a good plan. And you can trust him with it. And as I was doing that, I was sitting there thinking about things that I thought could have went a different way in life, right? A lot of things that I think could have went a different way. Because I'm gonna tell you, I've been doing this. When I say doing this, obviously Refuge has been going for 10 years, but for 5 or 6 years before that, I was in ministry, and I've just poured into so many people, and I've heard so many people's hearts, and I've seen God restore and build up so many people over that time, and then I've seen so many things just come crashing down, and I'm like, when I look at the body of work, the ministry that God's put me in has been, and I look at it from my human eyes, it seems like there's been a lot of God doing something amazing and then it getting ruined some kind of way. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be negative, but when we all know people that we're like, what happened? What just happened? You're like, why did they make that choice? Why are they back doing that again? How in the world could they have went back to that slot and started throwing it back on themselves? And when God had it set up so perfect for them, it seemed like in our eyes, right? So I've spent a lot of time was the faith really ever there? Was it really ever something that happened? Was it really ever the key that was ever turned in their heart were they ever saved? What the heck's going on? If God is such a good God and we can trust Him so much and His ideas are so good and His plan for our life is so good, how in the world when these people come and the whole front of the altar up here has got tears on it and snot on it and everything else, and these people just going nuts over here and giving their lives to God and everything being so black and white. God, this is what I used to be and this is who you've made me to be. How in the world, if all that is real, could they be doing that again? What about the promise you made me? What about the prayers we wrote on this floor? What is going on, God? I reflect on all that, and I'm sitting there torn, and you're like, what happened to the hunting trip? This is the hunting trip, right? That's what goes through my mind. And I'm just, because I got so many people that I love, and my way of dealing with people that I love that hurt me is just act like they don't even exist anymore. When I say that, I don't mean that in the worst way. I mean that in a way of being like, hey, if I just ignore it, the relationship's still the way it used to be, and everything's still there, and I don't have to really deal with reality right now. I deal with death the same way. I'm like, they're still alive over there. I just ain't went and seen them in a long time. It's not trying to be funny about it, but that's just, since I was a kid, that was kind of my coping mechanism to just act like they really didn't just say what they just said to me kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? They really love me. And so it just turned into everything else in life. And so I just kind of act like it's not there, but it is there. And so when I sit there and think about it, I'm like, all these people that I really do love and care about, what are they doing right now with themselves? What are they doing with their lives? And I came up with this scenario thing, and it was the reality that none of us are perfect. And I think we can agree to that. I'm not perfect. And that we all make mistakes. And see, this is the thing where I think God showed me something here. And He was like, absolutely, John, you're not perfect, and I love to use your imperfections for my glory. And you guys make mistakes, and I keep picking you up and dusting you off and saying, go ahead, boy, do your best. Keep swinging for the fence. I don't care how many times you strike out. I love you. And then He showed me, He opened my heart up to something else. He opened my soul up to something else in my spirit. And it was this third scenario. It's like, yeah, John, you're not perfect, and I'm making you into something that looks more perfect. And John, you make mistakes, but man, I just love seeing you try. I just love seeing you keep falling on your face, but I just love seeing you try. And He's like, but there's this other thing, John. And there's this thing where you have chosen to be disobedient. You knew what I was saying, and you chose to say no. You didn't make a mistake. You did exactly what you meant to do. You get what I'm saying? You're not perfect, and I accept your imperfection. And your imperfections is my beauty, right? Your mistakes is my glory. But see, there's this other thing that's in you, John, and it's this deal that you heard me say, don't do that, and you did it anyway. And see, I have to discipline that. I have to do something there, or I'm not the good God that you say I am. I'm not the perfect God that you say I am. My ways are not as good as you say they are. If I keep letting you hear me, and you not honoring, actually hearing the voice of God in your convictions and in your spirit, and you keep choosing to do something besides what I'm telling you, who does that make me in your heart? Right? Where do you place me in your heart? If you hear my voice and say no. So, that got me thinking about what I've been talking about grace and God's love and everything. And so I'm like, pour some of that on me, right? God, that's where we are right now this morning. Like, God, okay, here comes the grace. Right? And it is His grace. That is His grace, His convictions, and also His discipline is God's grace. And this is where it comes to this is like, if we talked about this and how He uses broken vessels, what happens after God restores your vessel and you choose to get a hammer and break it again? Okay, God, I was lost and now I was blind and now I can see. I was lost and now I'm found. Right? I'm in the light and I love it and it's going good. And then all of a sudden this shiny thing comes along, or this temptation comes along, or this person that, now we're getting stepping on toes. Now this person comes along that I can't stand. What am I going to do now? We already know. We hear the voice of God. You can say you hadn't heard it, but you have. If you're a Christian in here, you know you have. Okay, here it comes. There's the door. Don't walk through the door. Don't walk through the door. Can you walk through? We have been there. A lot of people say, I never heard God. Yes, you have. You just need to learn to hear His voice and quit saying it's not Him just because it's something that disagrees with what your flesh wants to do. Right?
Amen.
It's there. What happens when we take the hammer and break back the vessel that He has restored and put back together? He took 1,000,000 pieces and placed it back together perfectly. And we felt what that felt like. And now we've broken it again. Here we go. Y'all know the story of Jonah? The whale or the big fish. I love the real Bible people. The Nazis are like, doesn't say whale. Whatever. What kind of big fish? I guess it could be a big brim or something out there. If God wanted it to be, it could be. It's not even a saltwater fish, but if God wanted to swim in the salt, let's get technical. God could do that, and He could make him big enough to swallow a man. But I'm going to say Jonah and the whale because that's kind of how we all learned it. We know the story, right? Jonah, if you don't know the story, you know about him being in the belly of a whale, but I want you to see something. He heard the voice of God. Jonah heard God say, hey, man, I love you, and I need you to go do something for me. Because I think the voice of God always comes in love. And I need you to go do something. Well, what do you want me to do, God? I need you to go to Nineveh. I need you to tell them that I'm going to kill them. I'm just going to destroy the city. Nope. I don't think I'll do that. I'm not going and telling them that the wrath of God's coming. I'll run from God, right? I'll not do that. I'll do something different. I'll take my own idea and I'll say it's better than God's idea. So what does He do? He says, I'm not only going to not go there, I'm going to take a ship and go somewhere else. Well, of course, it gets rough and bad, and they realize somehow or another that Jonah's the cause of it, so they throw him overboard. Right now he's in the ocean. And that's where the big fish comes. See, Jonah could have drowned out there. He's disobeying God. God's discipline. God takes His hand off Jonah and says, hey, you didn't want to do what I said, now to the depths you go. You're just dead. But God doesn't do that. God sends a fish to eat him when he was about to sink to the depths, and he was thinking about everything he'd done wrong, and the water was coming up around him, and the pressure was coming up around him, and all of a sudden it seemingly gets worse. A big fish comes and eats him. Isn't that terrible? Think about it. Now y'all are sitting there already thinking this is a kid's story, this didn't really happen. Well, I believe that everything in the Bible happened. And like I said, if this would have been if God wanted it to be a largemouth bass that was big enough to eat him, it would have been there and it would have ate him. God's good and He is what He is and He does what He does. But now He's in the belly of a big fish, right? It just got worse. In my mind, and in my sight, and in my human eyes, and with my flesh. God told me to go do something and I didn't do it. I'm really regretting it. I should have. I knew I should have done that. And now my life's falling apart. I'm about to drown. It's really getting to where I can't breathe. And I could have just died there, but no, God didn't let me die right there. He let a big fish come and eat me, and now I'm sitting in his belly waiting to die. It's gotten even worse. Now I'm in this terrible, horrible, stinking, nasty place that I can't believe I'm in, and I just really wish I would have said yes to God instead of going through all of this crap. And this is Jonah right here in the middle of this deal, in the middle of this nightmare, and he don't know at the same time that the belly of that fish is God's hand cradling him and keeping him from drowning. Right? It's God's hand around him and saying, God's saying, I still love you, and I still have you, but guess what? You're in a terrible place because I cannot not discipline you for what you chose to do. You heard my voice and you chose to say no. So you don't realize where I'm taking you? I'm not taking you to where you wanted to go. I'm taking you back to give you the chance to do what I asked you to do before all this happened. We get that story? So he does, and in God's way, and in God's plan, and in God's goodness, he doesn't even do what he sends Jonah there to tell him he's going to do because he finds some righteous people, right? Like, okay, we're going to repent, so I'm not even going to do. So then he gets mad again. And he goes right back to the belly of the fish, not literally, but in a different way. Because you got to realize that God's good, and we can trust him. We're just to do what he wants us to do. What did God want? He wanted that city, that town, that place to repent and turn back to him. He had a man for the job, and Jonah was that man. He went through all of that for those people. It got a whole lot worse before it got better. But you would think, in the midst of that storm, in the midst of the ocean, in the midst of the fish, that God had taken his hand off of him, but he hadn't. We've got the privilege of hindsight in this. It's just like when I listened to somebody talking about football the other day. It's like, well, you got the privilege of seeing what happened, and now you get to make a choice as a coach. All those announcers, you should have done this, and they should have done that, and they did it. That's great. I could say that too. I'm a great coach too. Whenever I get to watch the game and then say, this is what you should have done. And it's the same way with this. You're like, well, we see what happened, we know, but you wasn't in the belly of that fish. Just like I don't know what you're going through, and I'm not in your situation, and it's hard for me to say, hey, you need to trust God in the middle of this because he still has his hand on you. You're his child. He's still got his hand around you right now. You just have to see it. You have to quit running and go back to where the place was that you decided to say no. We all have those places. The story of Israel in general is God's people is another example of this. One of the greatest stories is when God freed them from captivity. Israel, they go to Sinai. He gives them their commands and everything's going good. He gives them the law. He does all this. He's like, now go take your land. It's one of the best stories there. It's like the most realistic things. He's like, these are my people. I love you. I've been there. You saw me. I've been guiding you around. You know I've been with you. My presence has been with you. I'm here. I love you. I got a great plan for you, and I'm good. Now go take the promised land, the land of milk and honey. What do? They send spies over there. So there's really big people over there. I don't know if we can beat them. And the majority rules, so they're like, hey, we're not going to go over there. We're scared. Even though God said we can have it, we're not going to go. So what happens? They have to wander around for 40 years. A whole generation has to die. A lot of people don't know that story. They could have left Sinai and went straight into the promised land, but they didn't trust God. All we know is the story that they wandered around for 40 years and a bunch of them died in the desert. A whole generation did. We don't realize why. Because they heard the voice of God and they said, what? No. No, God. I don't trust you. I'm not going to do that. That's too uncomfortable. Those are big people over there. That's a big situation. I can't walk into that. You're not big enough. Or you're not going to hold true to your promises. Whatever we say. And then there's this thing that hit me on the head, and this is how you know Holy Spirit moves and he's in everything, is because Wednesday night we're reading through 2 Samuel. Chris is teaching it, and we're reading the story of King David. And everybody knows about David too. He's the man after God's own heart. That's how people know David. They don't know anything else. They just know that he's this fearless little boy who comes in and slays a giant. We know that he's the man, God's man for Israel. We know he's the king. That they put somebody in there before him because they asked for him, but they knew David was the guy. We know David is just this great, amazing person, but he made a mistake. And we know that about him too, because everybody says when you talk about David, they talk about how he's a man after God's own heart. How can a man after God's own heart commit adultery and murder and still be a man after God's own heart? And we know the story, and we're like, he was still the king, and that's why God uses broken vessels, and that's why God does this, but we miss those few chapters that comes after his adultery. It's easy to, right? We don't realize the consequence and the punishment he faced and what he lost for that. No, God, I'm going to do what I want to do instead of what you want me to do. So we look at we're good.
Yeah.
That's not a death scream or a pain scream back there. That's my feelings are hurt scream. I think just my judgment.
Yeah.
And so we look at David and we're like, okay, he and Bathsheba, he sees her over there. He thinks she's hot. He knows what he's supposed to do and he don't do it. He asks her to come. He sleeps with her. And then it gets terrible. Because then he decides to try to set it up. She gets pregnant, right? There's a consequence there. Right? There's something, I was just going to have something really quick and it's going to be cool and, she's going to go about her business, I'm going to go about mine. She calls him up a couple days later, hey, I'm pregnant. Oh, well, I got to get your husband back real quick. Uriah's got to come back and sleep with you so we can say it's his kid, right? This ain't my kid. We got to set this up, right? This is way back, right? You think it just happens today. This is way back whenever. He's like, no, this is going to be terrible. But he can't get him to go home. He's too committed to the kingdom. Uriah will not go back to his home because he's like, all the other soldiers are sleeping out in the cold. I'm not going back to my wife. I'm not going to go back to the comforts of home. I'm going to be here with the men. He's too good of a guy. He's too committed. So we can't set him up to have that deal where this is your baby, not mine. So what does he do? He sends him to the front line where he knows he'll be killed, and that's what happens. Uriah dies. So David's like, hey, covered that up. Everything's cool. But it wasn't. David lost everything. God saw it, and that's all that mattered. He took his kingdom. He took his family. Lost 3 kids. Am I right there? He lost 3. I'm talking about dead. And one of them was because of him, for sure. He lost everything. And I'm like, that was my part of the story that really, I was like, do you realize him saying no to God and us saying no to God has tremendous consequences? And we all get that. And the 3 stories I've used is that. And that's what my message is. But there's something that Chris said the other night, and I'm going to get him to read a little section of scripture that he read the other night. And the reason I'm doing it because he's a really good storyteller through reading, and I'm not. I just kind of, you're one of the out loud readers that kind of struggle through it. Chris isn't. I'm setting him up. He's going to stumble through it. He's a really good storyteller through reading, and I love him. And he's not telling a story; he's reading one, but it's good. So what I want you to do is there's this thing that he pointed out to me about David. David was a man after God's own heart, and he did realize that he deserved much worse than what he was getting, because this was God he was dealing with. And there's this moment where he's lost everything, his son, before he was killed, rose up and took his kingdom. Come up and not only did he take his kingdom, but he wanted to kill his father. So he had people going after David behind him was saying, hey, you know what? If I keep him alive, he's going to try to take back over the kingdom, so I'm just going to kill him. So David was faced with a decision. Let my son come after me and just be humble, and if he kills me, let him be. Or I could go after him, but David didn't want to go after him because it was his son. So we get into this point where he's leaving the country. He's leaving the place that he's at, and he has been king, God's anointed man. And this happens, and it's in 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 3, I think is where I want you to start.
Verse 5.
Verse 5. So read 5 through 13.
As King David came to Bahurim, a man came out of the village cursing them. It was Shimei, son of Gera, from the same clan as Saul's family. He threw stones at the king and the king's officers and all the mighty warriors who surrounded him. Get out of here, you murderer, you scoundrel, he shouted at David. The Lord is paying you back for all the bloodshed in Saul's clan. You stole his throne, and now the Lord has given it to your son Absalom. At last you will taste some of your own medicine, for you are a murderer. Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Abishai, son of Zeruiah, demanded. Let me go over and cut off his head. No, the king said. Who asked your opinion, you sons of Zeruiah? If the Lord has told him to curse me, who are you to stop him? Then David said to Abishai and to all the servants, my own son is trying to kill me. Doesn't this relative of Saul have even more reason to do so? Leave him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has told him to do it. And perhaps the Lord will see that I am being wronged and will bless me because of these curses today. So David and his men continued down the road, and Shimei kept pace with them on a nearby hillside, cursing and throwing stones and dirt at David.
The king's walking out. This reminds you of anything? He's walking out of the thing, walking out, leaving his country, trying to go about his way, and some guy is just throwing rocks at him, cursing him, won't let him go, just steady following him on this hillside, throwing stuff down at him. He won't do anything. And this is the thing. This is what Chris said the other night. I'm sitting there looking at all that, and there's this idea that David has in his mind is God's doing this. God told him to curse me. Now this is a guy after God's own heart, right? God told him to do what he's doing right now. God has me in the belly of this fish. God has me wandering around the desert. God has me with so much pressure on me, I think I'm fixing to bust right now. These consequences that could come down on my head right now. These things that are going on in my life right now that I can't control. God is doing this. And this is what David says in the midst of all of this humiliation, cursing, and some dude that's accusing him of things that some are true and some aren't. But he doesn't try to defend himself in any of it. He just says, God has me in this situation. He's got him in his situation. Maybe, in the midst of this, God will see that he has an opportunity to help me. So God can be back on my side again. God can not only have his hand on me in a clenched fist, crushing a little bit right now, but he'll see fit to look in there and show me grace again, and show me mercy again, and show me an opportunity for him to build me back up. And that's exactly what happened to David. But listen, even when it happened to David, it cost him. Do you understand that? He let all this happen, and everything wasn't all good. He begged his army to please spare my son. And they did. He lost him too. But in that loss, and in that moment, he was restored back to where he once was. Had to lose everything. But God never took his hand off of him. And he knew it. He knew it. What about the idea in our mind that in the midst of our worst time we've ever had, God is not absent? What about when we make those choices to break that vessel again? God is not absent. He is being a good dad because he's disciplining us for our choices that we made. We chose to say no. Who would he be if he didn't discipline us? When does God get to be just this pet that we push around and we tell what to do? When He chooses to say, hey, I'm still good with you saying no. We say, God, I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know what you're saying. What about when He says, okay, I am talking to you? What are you going to do about it? What do you expect of God in that moment? A couple of ideas, and then we'll over. It's not about hiding or acting like you don't mess up, right? God knows us. You can fool me, but you can't fool Him. This is what it is. It's acknowledging the fact, as we all do, that you disobeyed God. Accepting whatever God has in discipline for you. And praying this. God, through this pain, humiliation, hurt, loss, discouragement, may that give you a chance to help me again. To help me. Because that's the side I want to be back on with you, God. In your help. And in your kindness. And in your love. And in your grace. Back to what I said about so many losing their way. So many people make really bad decisions for their life and genuinely believe that God doesn't want anything to do with them anymore. But I think more than that, most people make really bad decisions in their life, and instead of acknowledging those decisions and acknowledging it to God and to everyone else, they choose to hide from those decisions and they run. And they hide. And they push back and they set them back. And for the rest of their life, those decisions that they made not being dealt with and not really truly feeling the grace and love of God in those moments, not accepting the discipline from God, instead running from it constantly, they never feel restored and they never feel their vessel has been put back together. We all make choices not to follow God. We all say no to God. But what about the person who says no to God and then runs from it for the rest of their life? I don't think there's a more miserable person in the world. And so when you lose your way, when you decide to make a terrible decision, you can either decide that God truly doesn't love you, and I'm just going to walk away from it, or either maybe he's not even real, or you can say God still has His hand on my life, and the only way to get restoration is to go back to the place where I was broken and find it there. It's okay. Don't get frustrated. You know you're a redneck when you write on the back of your sermon notes. I write on the back of a piece of paper instead of just using another piece of paper. Is that redneck or cheap? Yep. Is God good?
Yes.
Okay. Does He have good ideas? Does He have a good plan? Can you trust it? Okay. Can He allow suffering and consequences in your life and be good to you?
Yes.
Somebody who loves life and still be good to you whenever He chooses. I'm not going to go into a story, but God decided to. There's one really poor guy in the Bible that didn't do nothing wrong. And God just allowed Satan to heap all kind of consequences on his life. Just for being a good guy. His name's Job. Just going to tell you. Was he still good? Or was he some evil guy? Listen, will you accept his hand on you and that he will restore you in his time? And his timing is all that matters, not yours. There's a guy that God put on my heart, and he doesn't go to this church, so I won't try to figure it out. He is in ministry that made a choice in his life that was terrible. I have done the same thing. We all make choices that are terrible. And I've watched him and talked to him and prayed with him and cried with him over the years. He's lost so much. I just want you to bear with me here. He's lost so much. Mind you, he's still in ministry. He acts like everything's okay. But his life's a wreck. Just kids. I don't want to be too specific. It's a nightmare. And God really showed me that it's almost like having a really terrible, I've used this example before, having like a bullet go into you, and it puts a little hole as big as your finger, and you can cover it up with a Band-Aid, so that's what you do, right? You cover that bullet wound with a Band-Aid, and you can't see the bullet wound anymore, but are you okay? No, you're not okay. You colored a bullet hole with a Band-Aid, but all the damage is internal. So if you don't deal with that internal damage, you're still going to die. You just have covered up a hole. And that's what's happened. And I think a lot of people are sitting there with this Band-Aid over a bullet wound. And they haven't dealt with God, with what all the internal damage that's happened. And not only that, they haven't repented of what they said no about. They haven't went back to that place of disobedience and restored that relationship with God, so it's gone to that same place. It just gets deeper and deeper, and the consequences never end, because God's like, I love you too much not to discipline you, and I'm a good father. I'm so good that I'm never going to not be a good father. And I got to get you back here, because if you're not back here, you're not good with me, and you want to inherit the kingdom of God. So this is here's my thing for you. This is a small group of us here today. So listen, this is for you. It's a question that I've asked 1,000,000 times, because it got asked me 1,000,000 times before I ever asked it to anybody once. What's God saying? And I think just as important, and for some of us at this point in our relationship with God, more importantly, what are you going to do about it? It's dangerous to keep asking God to talk, God to speak, and not be willing to obey when you hear Him. Because God's like, hey, I told you to do something, Jonah. I told Israel, I think I made it pretty specific. David, what I want you to do is pretty specific. And there's a list of other people in the Bible that said, nope. Where are you? What's God saying to you? What you going to do about it? It's really important. Where do you need to go? Where do you need to go to restore your relationship with Him? It could be years ago. You could be still in the belly of that fish. Are you ready? I'm going to pray. God, we love you. We thank you for today. God, thank you for everything you're doing. I thank you for who you are and what you've done in life. And God, I just pray for everybody in here that that you'll help them. I think most importantly is see that you're good and that we can trust you in everything. God, search our hearts and our souls of where it is that we might have walked away, where it is that we might have decided to do something that we knew we weren't supposed to do, or not go do something that we knew we were supposed to do. God, it's so many things that it could be in our lives. God, I just pray for everyone who's out there who have forgotten that you love them, have not trusted you, who may have a hard time believing in you, or that you're good, or that you're even listening. God, I pray for your mercy and grace on them, and God, that you never stop, that you never quit calling them, that you never quit speaking to them, that you never quit just being a good father. God, I know you won't, but God, we just pray, and we stand in this place to pray over a lot of people who you know are broken, who need you, who need to be restored by you, who need to just know that you still love them, that you're still there, that you haven't left, that you're God, I just want you to be real in their lives. And God, however you do it, I pray your best for your children and what you're trying to do. God, for this church, for these people that are here, God, I do lift up everything that's going on in their lives and what you want to do for them. God, that you give them peace and patience and everything that they need to go through this life and these things that are going on in their lives right now. God, I just thank you so much for who you are, for your son Jesus, for what that name means in our lives. And I pray these things in his name. Amen.